speak to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Peter, it seems this is a major incident with all three emergency response services involved.
Yes, although if there are any small crumbs of comfort to be taken, it is from the statement that Merseyside police issued saying that their armed police have detained somebody and recovered a knife, and that they're not looking for anybody else in connection with this. Now, of course, that comes as no consolation whatsoever to anybody who's been hurt and their loved ones. I fully appreciate that. But in terms of reassurance for the public, it would appear that in terms of any further harm, that possibility has now been neutralised.
Peter, the press release says casualties, but of course viewers and listeners will be wondering whether there is any latest news on whether there have been any fatalities.
Well, the most important thing in any major incident where there are serious injuries or even deaths, we don't know, of course, the most important thing is that relatives are informed first. That is absolutely crucial. For anybody listening or watching, put yourself in that position if you could, and imagine the horror and the hurt of establishing via social media or via a media outlet, for example, that someone you loved dearly had been hurt or killed. So it is only right and proper that the correct channels are followed and procedures so that the relatives and the loved ones of those injured are notified before we get to hear about it.
And it is important to stress just how early we are into what we know about what has taken place here, because the police were first called less than 2 hours ago. It really does seem that we're going to be getting more information all the time on this issue. Peter, in your experience, when responding to issues like mass stabbings, what are the first things the police have to do?
The first thing always is the protection of life. And so whilst it may be police officers going there that you would imagine might primarily be thinking about arresting somebody, and that would of course be very much in their thinking, the whole thing is preserve life, which is why our courageous frontline police men and women so often go home from a shift covered in blood. And that, unfortunately, is a byproduct of the increasingly violent country in which we live in. Knife crime in the last decade has increased by 78%. And that's only the recorded figures. We have an epidemic of knife crime and people using other bladed instruments. Let's look back in just the last year or so at 2 catastrophic incidents, one in Hainault, where a 14-year-old boy lost his life, and 2 police officers were very seriously injured. A man is awaiting trial for that matter, so I won't mention it further. But then if we go back to the 13th of June last year in Nottingham, Valdo Calacane, on his murderous rampage, who killed Barnaby, Ian, Grace, and seriously injured a number of other people. These incidents are appalling. They are creeping into our lives with greater frequency, and it cannot just be the responsibility of the police alone to try and tackle this epidemic.
Wow.
Peter, do you know any more information about the crime profile of this particular area? Because, of course, you mentioned a lot of other incidents that have taken place relatively recently, and we know knife crime is on the rise. But obviously we don't want to speculate too much about what the motivations behind this attack might be, because we don't have the information yet to discuss that. But just speaking about the sort of the crime profile of the area, is this something that would be, obviously it is inherently shocking, but is this an area that is prone to knife crime?
In the last 5 years, I've had the great pleasure of travelling frequently to Liverpool as part of my hunt for a man wanted for 2 murders, Kevin Parle, and that's included Southport, that has a lovely beach, although you have to be very careful of quicksand, and it's where Anthony Gormley's statues, which are of naked men, are actually put on the beach facing out towards the west. and they are quite striking things to go and see. I've met people there. It's a mixed area. It has very nice streets with boutique-y type coffee shops where you can go and enjoy a coffee and a pastry. But like so much of that city, and in fact all our cities, poverty sometimes lives cheek by jowl very close to considerable wealth. Liverpool is a great city with some astonishing people, and it has its challenges. Of course, in its glory days as a port, there was lots of smuggling and importation and skullduggery, but it remains a great city presented with challenges around crime like London, Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle and others.
Well, Peter Bleksley, do stay with us.